Thank you. So, um, again, my name is Javan. My professional background is in community organizing, and that includes activism. That includes working to serve youth. That includes working to serve those who are incarcerated, and right now, those who are brothers and sisters in labor. Uh, so, I wanted to approach what I had to say from the perspective of a community organizer. And I wanted to also cover a little bit of history. So, at the deepest level of my being, I believe that racism can and will be defeated, not because of some hopeful sentiment, but because of the fact that for approximately 299,500 years, racism did not exist. That is the vast majority of human existence on this planet, and we can get back to a place where we are not dealing with these disastrous issues that we have right now. It is a cancerous tumor on our modern age that can be eradicated. Race, money, religion, gender, economics, politics, these are all social constructs. And while they do have some basis in objective reality, their primary power is purely subjective. They're driven by the stories that we tell about them or the narratives. The one great truth that we know about racism is that the oppression has and continues to be about money. Only only the narrative has changed, and that has happened significantly four times. First, we think of first what we the first time that happened was with what we think of as race today. It traces its roots back to Europe when two very important things happened: the rise of scientific thinking itself with the Renaissance and the shift towards global capitalism and colonialism. For 700 years prior to that time, Moors, Muslims from Africa ruled Europe, bringing a wealth of ideas and knowledge, including things that we still use today, like the Arabic numerals on your keyboard right now. This planted the seeds for their era of enlightenment. It's not coincidental that African peoples were categorized as subhuman just at a time when there was a booming need for labor in the New World and Europeans were trying to figure out how to compete in a global economy. European nations could not have done what they did to people, so they changed the narrative to say that they were not dealing with people when going to Africa and kidnapping folks. Second, during slavery, you had during slavery, if you had taken a survey of white attitudes about African Americans, you might have been shocked to hear them say words like honest, hardworking, trustworthy, happy. But who would want a lazy slave? How could you entrust dishonest people with your care and feeding on a regular basis? And of course, they would not believe their property is anything but happy to be in their care. The narrative changed yet again at the end of slavery when with the Jim Crow era began and the prison industrial complex began incarcerating people and leasing out their labor. This is when the idea of Black criminality took hold and the justification of continued exploitation. More, more than ever, excuse me, moreover, when the idea of the end of enslavement of Black peoples, they had the wealth of knowledge and skills. Our ancestors knew everything they needed to build their own communities: farming, animal husbandry, construction. The very foundation stones of the United States Capitol building were set in place by our enslaved ancestors. This is why whites sought to disrupt and disenfranchise Blacks immediately after emancipation, because for hundreds of years, we had been amassing the skills and knowledge, and now it was going to be used for our own benefit. The third time the narrative changed had came just after the Civil Rights Act of 1964. And while that act was crucial, it was really the Fair Housing Act of 1968 that was a landmark because, at least on paper, it broke down the barriers to where people could rent, own homes, and made the effort to integrate and build an inclusive society more of a reality. It was about this time you started to hear the phrase Black on Black crime or violence. 90% of Black people are killed by other Black people. 87% of white people are killed by other white people. Proximity and familiarity, more so than any other factor, determines who perpetrators of crime will select as victims. It has absolutely nothing to do with race. This shift in policy, which was supposed to end discrimination, came with the shift in narrative. That moved the problems that African Americans face from white government officials to people in their own community, and more often than not, to themselves. Until recently, and it still happens, I believe our Surgeon General just said Black people need to make better decisions, an African American himself. But leaders often say that there is a values problem in our community and people need to make better choices. When we talk about values, we are talking about core features of a person. When we talk about decision making, we are talking about the essential elements of a person's faculty for governing themselves. These narratives about Black on Black crime, values, and decision making are all efforts at victim blaming. Crime happens where there is oppression and or lack of opportunity. This is true in the mostly Black South Side of Chicago and the mostly white rural South End of West Virginia. The fourth time the narrative has changed is Black Lives Matter. This is a refutation of everything that has come before and is opening up a complex and painful and necessary conversation. We are writing the history of Black Lives Matter right now. In this event, in the streets where people are protesting, in cities where Confederate monuments are being removed and ripped down, and ultimately with the policies that will follow. African peoples, wherever we happen to be in the world, and African peoples, wherever we happen to be in the world, and all people who believe that our lives matter and that no one is free until we are all free, have a responsibility to do the following. We must build power in the four cornerstones of civilization and exercise it in places where it can have maximum impact. Those four cornerstones of civilization are social, political, economic, and cultural. Social and political power are like the weather. They change quickly and don't always have a lasting impact. Economic and cultural power have more of a chance to have an impact on society for the long term. Now, I want to use law enforcement as a model for how my theory of change works. First, I want to set the stage. New York City Police Department. It was founded in 1845, and today the department has 36,000 officers, part of a city administration of 250,000 people. That's not just a small town, that is a good-sized community, and it all serves a city of 8.3 million people. This is a big institution that is hard to change. If you've ever tried to organize a family event with 3 or 4 people, then magnify that by the many thousands of people that are in the city of that size. We need more Black police officers, but police officers don't make policy. We need more Black elected officials. We need more Black prosecuting attorneys and defense attorneys and judges. We need more people in City Hall. We need more people in all of those places because it takes a comprehensive approach to this to resolve these issues. We need more business owners who can say, you know, what kinds of policies they want to have governing the places where they do business. All of these kinds of power work together, and there's a business term called vertical integration, which means that it's not enough to own the business, but you also want to own the manufacturing. You want to own the sourcing of materials. You want to own every element that you can, so that way you have the most control over that system. And that's how we can work cohesively to address these issues. The important thing is working where you have maximum impact. If you're going to start a business or any endeavor, you want to look at the competition. There is a lot of competition to control the police departments in our major cities. But we have a huge country. We have a bigger planet. Where can we go where we can use these same resources that we have to have maximum impact? I love to travel. I go to small towns all the time and I say, what happens to these places where there's only one stoplight, where people are leaving instead of going? What if we were to move to these kinds of communities that are smaller, where 5 or 10 people on a police department is essentially the entire police department? We have school systems that are failing, but what if we had more and more people moving to these smaller communities where we can have an impact on the entire school system with only 50 or 60 people. Then we're talking about education, changing the way people think, changing how people think, changing the opportunities that people have access to. So that's where I want to leave my comments, is that the narratives matter, the stories matter, the things we believe about ourselves and our community matter. But if we're looking at it strategically, we need to be exercising the resources, or we need to be using the resources that we have in the places where they can have the most impact.